Hey everyone, welcome to the B-side. Welcome to the season finale of the B-side. I keep wanting to say series finale, but it's not a permanent thing, hopefully. This is we're a limited series, like Moon Knight. But the idea here is the school year starting, and with wait a minute, let me turn off my little mic. With school starting and stuff, as a teacher, it's my time and energy is probably going to be at a premium. So it's best to kind of like see how the lay of the land is before doing stuff that's gonna take up more energy than I might have at the time. So let me kind of talk about what I want to talk about today as kind of the final run of season one of the B-side. It's going to be kind of like a full circle thing. We started working with a character in the first B-side, which was a character from a short I'm currently working on, a little Dungeons and Dragons type short. And this is going to be another character in there. There are 5 main adventurers in my little plot here. I've already got 4 done, which is cool. And this is one of them. This is not my little paladin guy. So let me just kind of bring up what the guy looks like, at least in Maya. Gus, how you doing? Jamie, Ben, Ivan, again, can't thank you guys enough, not just today, but for hanging out with me for the past few weeks here and going through the B-sides. It's been really fun. I hope we keep going with this once the schedule kind of calms down. And I just want to kind of I want to kind of take we started working on the first character for the short on the first B-side, and now kind of at the last B-side of the summer. 3D Manic, how you doing, man? Nice to see you again. Also, thank you for showing up and hanging out with me this summer. We ended with kind of like taking a character that I've done and kind of doing a render and kind of taking it into Photoshop and playing around with different render passes in ZBrush and different texture techniques and stuff in Photoshop to kind of play around with that. And this is really kind of meant to be kind of a bit of a hodgepodge. Like, I want to show you things that I do. Not saying they're the most amazing approach to this, but this is kind of what works for me so far, at least. And I'm going to show you some things I do which might not be relevant to this particular character as well, just to kind of show you some ideas that might be relevant to your character, depending on the nature of the render, the nature of the picture you're going for. Like, for example, the Skull Kid sculpt that I'm doing with the Stylus League on the weekends. This little picture here, this comp is taking place outdoors. It's kind of got natural lights, all kinds of like scenery stuff. It might be a little bit kind of grainier, a little bit more, organic than if you're doing a character render that's just going to be kind of like against the backdrop. That's going to be just more about showing the character off, right? So I'm just going to kind of throw around some ideas as to what works for me when I take a picture, a couple renders in ZBrush, and then bring them into Photoshop, and how I kind of composite things together. Hopefully it'll be helpful to folks. Again, and like I said, this is not meant to be definitive. It's just where I am currently in terms of how I do it, and I just want to kind of show you, what the process is. So what I did basically this is my little paladin character. This is one of my guys. I'll turn off the control curves for a second so you can see where he is in Maya. So again, he's kind of lanky. He's got some armor, so I have to kind of worry about that armor moving around when I pose him. I want to kind of give him this kind of self-important pose, right? So I posed him into like this kind of, like he's posing for his, for his portrait essentially. I kind of felt that kind of gave me the attitude that I was going for with him. So I exported these OBJs out into ZBrush because I already had, of course, a ZBrush file of this character, and I kind of swapped in the original so I can keep the detail. And I just want to kind of go over when I bring it into ZBrush. I just want to kind of go over a couple of the settings that I set up before I start rendering, and then I kind of want to explain the different render passes that I do, and then we'll bring it into Photoshop and start playing around with kind of like just different texturing techniques, right? So here's my little dude, and again, you of course you decide what kind of document size you want for your render. I made mine basically double the size of a 1920 by 1080, so I have lots of points. Thanks, Gus. Good call. Sometimes I get told the music is too low. Sometimes it's too loud. Thank you. Thank you very much. I was going to say thank you. Yeah. See, that was when I came up with the idea for this pose. I kind of wanted it to be almost just like a parentheses, like that. Like he's kind of got a very rubbery feel to him. So when I brought this in again, obviously you can figure out where you want your camera to be. And if you're going to be doing this, because I'm going to be rendering out a bunch of different passes, I don't want to accidentally move my camera. So you do want to make sure you lock your camera. I mean, it's something that you probably already know, but I believe it's under draw there's a little camera lock button. So once you're 100% sure you like where your character is, right, make sure that you lock your camera, because if I render out like 6 images and then accidentally move my camera, I have to go back and do them all over again. So, or you can also go to your timeline and kind of like keyframe your camera, but I'll just lock it. Gus, thank you. Yeah, like I said, I was really happy with this pose. I was a little afraid that I was going to be able to get a nice little arc there because of the armor, but it bent okay with the rig that I made. So the first thing I wanted to do, and again, this is stuff that I apologize if it's something that everyone knows. It's just one of those things that I wouldn't have known if someone didn't tell me. Before I render out this stuff, I want to make sure that my lighting setup is okay. So in my render palette, I'm going to go to my BPR shadow. Generally speaking, the global strength, I only really focus on these top 4 right here, even going to the top 3, the floor strength I don't really care about. But the global strength, again, I always try and make it relatively low, like 0.6 or 0.5. I can always make it heavier with the shadow pass when I bring it into Photoshop. So I'd much rather have too little that I have to add on than too much. And under that we have the raise and the angle. And again, if this is stuff that you already know, I apologize for the repeat. But the angle basically is how quickly it goes from light to shadow, right? Whether there is a very harsh divine line between the lit area and the shadow area, that's what you get when the angle is at the 0. The higher the angle, the more of a gradient there is from light to shadow. Tony Gore, how you doing, man? I'm sorry, Tony has a lot of construction noise at his house, and he decided he didn't want to have that going through the microphone. I appreciate that. I appreciate Tony for hanging out with me on the streams, because again, it's so much fun when the guys are all together. And yeah, so I just want to thank him for that. So yeah, the higher the angle, the more of a blur of a gradient there is between light and shadow. But once you add that angle, then that gradient needs to be a smooth gradient, and that's what the number of rays comes in. The higher the number of rays, the smoother that shadow is, the smoother that gradient is between light and shadow, right? So generally speaking, I try and kind of have the angle be around 20 degrees and the rays about 50 or 60. That's just a general rule for me. Like there's a real after a certain point, you can crank up the rays, and all it's going to do is make the render take forever. It's not going to really change much at a certain point. So I stick around like 20-degree angle or so, and I just keep the rays between 50 and 60 generally. It just makes the fall off a little bit better. But those are all. Everything else underneath here, I don't touch any of these. I don't even know what half of them do, to be honest with you. All I know is that when my students mess with them, the renders look really weird, so I tend not to touch them. But that's really all I care about, is just the shadow being not too dark and also not too harsh and not too splotchy, right? So not too dark is global strength, not too harsh is the angle, not too splotchy is the rays, and then I'm good to go. All right, so what I typically do when I render this out, again, this is going to depend on the kind of character you're doing. This is a character with a lot of metal, a lot of armory stuff. So when I render this out, I'm going to render out a bunch of different light angles, but I'm also going to render out some different material passes that I will be able to kind of incorporate into the final picture. So in this case here, again, I'm not going to go through all the renders here. I've already rendered them out, so we're not going to have to sit here and watch the thing calculate over and over again. But to be fast about it, I'll do one render just like this, right? I'll just hit BPR, and I'll get my render out. And there's a couple of things that you want to export out right away. I don't know if my voice gets weird when the renders, but hey, mini chicks, so glad to see you here today. Again, thank you so much for showing up for during the B-sides. It's been so much fun to have everyone here while we're talking about the little stuff that we're doing. When you render this stuff out, again, obviously, I'm going up here to my render menu and go to my BPR render pass, right? And you get like a bunch of options here for your shaded, for your depth, for your shadow, and for your mask. You want to export out all of these. The composite one, there's really no need for that one. That one just has the background. It also has any filters you've incorporated into it. It will kind of use those as well. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can get a really cool picture that way. It's just something I'm not going to need because I'm going to be going into Photoshop and doing a lot of stuff there. But the shaded, the BPR shaded, I export this out as a Photoshop document. It's just the color render, right? The depth pass, and again, this is stuff that if it's obvious, I apologize. To me, it was never obvious. The depth pass is actually a really important pass. It's something that I use a lot. It's basically, it's like a mask. It's like a mask based on camera depth, and you can use that to kind of do camera blurs and other things like that. So I'll export that out. I brought the shadow because, again, like I said before, if the shadow isn't crazy dark, I always have this layer I can just multiply over top of it as many times as I want and get it nice and dark, right? And the mask obviously is the most important thing ever. Zane, how you doing, man? Nice to see you again. So this is where again, I export this one out, and then with the basic materials, the basic paint, all that kind of stuff, I'll do 4 more renders for the most part with regular lighting. I'll do a render with the lighting coming straight from above, from the left, from the right, and from underneath. And really all this is doing is just giving me different renders with different parts of the model being illuminated and different parts not being illuminated. And I can kind of mix and match them a little bit and kind of like not be so dependent upon the light direction when I go into Photoshop. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. And then I'll do some rim passes, right? So I'll just click on my light, click on my little orange dot here to send it behind my model. And I'll do some rim light passes. I'll actually probably come up here to the light and crank up the intensity a little bit, like maybe at 1.5 or so, maybe even higher, just so it's really intense, because again, all I'm getting now basically is going to be a rim pass. So if I were to render this out right at this rim light thing, I'm going to be getting the same model, but some parts of the model, the outer edges are going to be very, 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 very bright, right? Like that. So I'll render out these. And again, I'll render out maybe 2 or 3 of these, one with the rim light on the left, one on the right, and one straight above. So basically, I've rendered out like 7 or 8 passes of this with just the model, you know, same paint, same everything, just with the light from different angles. And Jamie asked, yeah, do I save out all the shadow and stuff like that? No, I only save the shadow from the first render, from like the basic light coming from, you know, like the 3/4, you know, the basic render, because it's the other ones are really more about just kind of like selective illumination, not the shadow. So I haven't needed it. If I did that, I'd probably get really confused as to what I was doing. So no, generally my most basic shadow is essentially used as my occlusion. I know there is an occlusion pass you can activate. I've never done it just because it doesn't seem much different than the shadow, at least in my experience. But it's definitely useful. You can use, in fact, occlusion is really good to use actually as a mask for some things you might bring in Photoshop, like for adjustment layers and stuff. So those are the renders that I do with the texture and the paint already applied, right? And then what I'll do is I'll do some other renders to kind of like focus on things like specularity and so forth. So what I'll do at this point is I'll go over here in my subtool palette, excuse me, hold down the Shift key and click on the little paintbrush icons, right, to make all the paint hide for now. Because I'm going to be basically kind of like using a temporary material for what I'm going to be doing next. Sorry, I was having some dry throat issues. So for specularity, and again, it's a matter of what kind of model you have. If you have a character that's organic, you might want to have a really tight spec, like, you know, like almost like a toy plasticky thing where you have like a really tight thing. In my case, I didn't really want that. I just wanted to have some shine. So what I'll do now is, because all of my paintbrush icons are turned off, it's going to simply inherit whatever my current color / material setting I have, right? So I'll go with black. And for my material, I'll choose something like blend. Because again, a blend has just a nice, subtle little, almost like a broad highlight. Like I said, if you wanted to have something more, obviously more shiny, you might choose something like toy plastic and you'll get a very, very hot, very bright highlight. But for me, I'm just going to go with blend. And again, I'll have the light on one side, render that out and save it, right? Left-hand side and save it. So basically all I'm getting is a black and white or grayscale image with some highlights on it, which I can then just use like in a screen or an add mode in Photoshop, wherever I need it to be. All right. So that's kind of the idea for that. I'm going to be doing a few things like this just to kind of render out some things or some material passes, which I might find useful. So for example, again, in my guy, there's a lot of armor and that kind of stuff. So it makes sense to have a couple material passes that are metallic. So I have my color back to white. I'll come in here and I'll choose something like this one here called Reflect 2, which I think it's got to be part of ZBrush. I don't think I ever got it. So again, here's another one, right? You know, I'll have this be white Reflect 2. I'll save that out. In the light angle, it doesn't really matter for some of these materials. Some of them are matte caps. Doesn't really matter a whole lot. But if it does change direction, you can just kind of gauge whatever you think would be most useful. I only did the different light angles for the actual diffuse for the color. This is just material passes. So I'll do the reflect 2. Again, I'll choose something reflected matte because obviously you have some really interesting reflections going on here. I think, well, another one I'll do, and this is something that, again, if you have a character that I did a gold pass as well, but I think I did like a gold with like a little bit of a brassy tint to it because I wanted to have some of that. But I do a couple other things. And one, if you have especially if you have an organic character with a lot of skin, I'll do like one of these matte cap skins, and I'll probably move the color maybe a little bit toward the reddish, and I'll render out this. And I'll use this as like a subsurface scattering type pass where you can kind of overlay with like a soft light blend mode. And again, we'll talk about this. We'll see it in Photoshop. But this is, I'll render out one of these because I might only use it a little bit here and there, but it might kind of give the skin a little bit of a reddish, like light diffuse translucency going on. Now, obviously there are 1,000 other materials you can get from ZBrush Central that are already with ZBrush. One of the ones that I really love, and I don't even know how much it does. I just think it adds a little bit of dash of kind of like, it flattens out, not flattens out, it kind of mats out the image a little bit. It's a cavity pass in my case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, and this is an important thing to do. I'm going to go to my light box to get the material that I want because it's not one that's the default material. Just remember, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this, just know that before you go to the light box to grab a new material, you want to make sure you select one you don't mind losing, because when you grab a material from the light box, it kind of swaps out for the one that you currently have. So I'm going to choose one that I know I don't care about, something like this. And this one here, I think this material is one I got it just from ZBrush Central. I'm sure it's one of the ones I downloaded from there because I don't think I got it from anywhere in particular. But if not, you know, if it's something that you might need, just let me know. But I'm pretty sure it's out there in ZBrush Central. It's like a whole bunch of these ones called Loden, Loden, and there's like Loden 01, 02, 03, and so on. I just use this one, Loden 03. It's got this kind of yellowish, tannish tint to it. And what I don't know why I've chosen this one, by the way. I just used it once and I liked it. But on its own, it's nothing great. But what I'm going to do now is go up here to my material settings, and under my modifiers, I'm going to crank up cavity detection. And when you can see when I do that, right, it kind of really makes a high contrast where those little indentations are. And sometimes you might want to also tone down the intensity A because it does render out pretty bright. And then when you render this out, all it's going to do basically is it's going to be a somewhat tan, highly cavity-ish pass. And it's just really, really useful. Like, I really love this one. I put this on top with like a soft light blend mode, and it just kind of desaturates everything a little bit. It kind of makes it feel a little less fake, I guess. So this pass is like the one I love. I don't know how great it is, but I like it. Anyway, so those are the ones that I typically do, those passes, right? And again, and there are times, like there's nothing, like I'm like, I should go through and do a sky metal if I wanted to, you know what I mean? Because again, depending on the material that you want or the character you're doing, you might find it'll be more useful to have a lot more different types of shiny materials or reflective or matte, whatever you think, right? But a lot of this stuff that a lot of the things I'm going to need, metallic stuff, leathery stuff, perhaps, I'm going to just do that in Photoshop, right? So again, just keep that in mind also. Don't feel like you have to get everything in ZBrush, just things that might be useful. I've rendered out like 20 different images for a comp, and I maybe used 12 sometimes. You know, it's not always the case that they're all useful, but it's good to have. So I've exported those all out. I'm going to go ahead and just get out of ZBrush here because now we're going into Photoshop. And so here's, now in my case here, I just made a backdrop. I just found just an old grungy material, did a little hue saturation change, and I did a little bit of an exposure adjustment layer to kind of like, you know, and I just kind of masked out some of the brightness just to kind of give me something. I don't know if I want to keep this or not. I just want to have something behind the character. So again, hopefully this isn't boring. I just want to explain what I do when I bring stuff into Photoshop. Most of all, when you're working in Photoshop, there's going to be a lot of layers. And I know it's not necessarily exciting, but you really want to keep them organized. You really want to keep them organized. So you can see here, if I'm going to go to my my render stuff here. So here is my little paladin. Here are my renders. Oh, okay, maybe not. Oh, I'm in the wrong drive. I'm fine, folks. We're all good here. We're all good. So let me go to my paladin. All right. So you can see here, all my renders, I have all these different, you know, Photoshop documents, right? And I named them as I rendered them out. I had a couple of metallic ones and all that kind of stuff. And when I rendered out those first couple of passes, the main pass and the light different angles, I saved them out as light 1, light 2, light 3, light 4, right? The main pass, which is the normal light, and then the 4 different light angles. So I brought those in the Photoshop. You can see here they are. This is my regular pass. This is my light 1, my light 2, my light 3, my light 4. And I put them all in a folder called base lighting. And that folder is the one that I applied the mask to. Instead of applying the mask to an actual picture, which like can be a real pain, just apply it to the entire folder. That way, everything you do in that folder will stay within the boundaries of your character. I used to do it mask per thing, and then I saw someone just apply it to the folder, and I was like, yeah, why wasn't I doing that? I'm an idiot. So when I brought these different ones in here, you're going to see, here's my basic render here. Yes, in fact, you know what? It's actually kind of silly for me. Thank you, Jamie, because I always forget this. I actually should probably just move this whole darn thing, because, you know, there you go. Who needs to see this? All right. So when I bring these different layers in, right, again, I just put them on top and normal. And then all I start doing is I start playing around with opacity and blend mode. So here's my L1, right? So here's my layer 1. It's basically light coming from, it looks like the left-hand side here. And I kind of played around with material with the blend mode. You can see here, for example, I'm going to go to the one on the very, I'm going to the very top first. One on the very top, I have this set to soft light at an opacity of 28%. If I turn this off and on, it's not doing a whole lot. It's just kind of keeping this from getting too blown out. Light 3, which was light coming from the top, I believe. Again, I have it set to screen. Most of the time I'm setting these to screen because I just want to kind of use the light that it's bringing. But I also tend to have the opacity very, very low because I just want to have a little bit of reflected light. So you can see here on the right-hand side of him, right? If I turn this off, it's in shadow because the original render had the shadow the light coming from the left. All this does is it just brings a little bit of that color back, right? And it can flatten it a little bit, but that's why I tone it down. I just want to have a little bit of bounce light. You can see here, the one on top, I set this to soft light. And again, all it does is it kind of brings a little bit of that color back in. And there's no rhyme or reason to this. This was me essentially just kind of playing around with a different, I wish there were a rhyme or reason to it, but I just started kind of messing around with them until I get a balance of light that makes me happy. See, Jamie says, is there a quick way to get them all in one file as layers? You know, if there probably is a quick way. I just open and copy and paste because it kind of forces me to organize them as I go. They're probably, I'm sure it's like a Photoshop action thing that does that, but that's kind of that's above my pay grade. I don't even know how that works. But yeah, I'm almost positive there is, but I don't know what that is. And again, but if I bring them in one at a time, I can kind of put them in their folders and just kind of like arrange them the way I want to. And again, like these are just, as you can see here, like this layer 1 is set to overlay at a 20%. So like what that does is it'll kind of brighten some areas and darken some others. And then layer 2 is set to screen, which is going to lighten some areas. As you can see, it lightens quite a bit. I might even tone it down a little bit. But again, I want to just have a nice even bit of illumination. So it doesn't look great at this point. It looks a little bit flat because I've lost some of that. But that's kind of the point, is I want to have the option of darkening areas later on. I don't want to have to worry about not have the light information, right? I can always darken it later on, but I just want to have the light information, but I want it to feel like it's more bounced lighty and not just lit everywhere. So that's the part that is the most, in my mind anyway, it's the most like unorganized. It's the most lacking in a nice, reliable thing, because I'm just tinkering with, sometimes I make it screen and tone it down. Sometimes I make it overlay or soft light. I just want to have a balance of light and shadow that makes me happy, that makes it feel like it's a decent starting point for everything else. Okay, that's the idea. And I brought in my other renders too. So again, here is spec 1 and spec 2. I haven't done anything to these yet. This is just, these two different renders of different directions of specularity. And again, that folder also has the mask applied to it. So no matter what I do, it's just going to be only visible where he is. I haven't even, again, so the base lighting one, I did go through ahead of time and tweak them only because that's the one that's the most trial and error. This stuff here we're going to do together because it's just stuff that we can kind of play around with. Right above that is the materials tab. And again, materials is, just for lack of a better term, it's the stuff that's not about light. So I have my blue chrome pass, I have a brass pass, a metallic pass, and my subsurface scattering pass. They're going to get different blend modes, different all kinds of stuff. I just pop them in that folder because I put them above the specularity, just because the metallic stuff is probably going to be more than the actual spec is. Effects on top, you can see here, this is my reflection 1, reflection 2, those different metallic ones I did, my cavity pass, and I put a comic ink one there. I don't know if I'm going to use it, but I just did it because I wanted to kind of play around with it if it was there. So again, we're going to like open all these up as we go, but I just put them in different folders because I kind of knew that there are different stages in the process here. Yeah, and Gus, yeah, exactly. There's a quick option. There is that. Yes, there is this. I think it's like app link or photo app link or something like that. Yeah. I should probably learn that stuff. And here is my rim lighting one. So again, I just have rim 1, which is light coming from the right hand side, rim 2, which is from the left, and then rim 3, which is pretty much the same, it's just a little bit more from above. So these are the fun. For me, the rim lights are really, really fun because you can actually colorize them a little bit and actually play around with color light as well. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I feel like I'm like the people in the cooking shows. Like, well, I've already pre-baked, at 400 degrees. So now, and obviously, and there's also that shadow pass, which which came out, which is this one, right? That's the first one I saved out. I popped that on top of everything. And set it to multiply, right? So I get my little shadow here. I just leave that on because you're always going to want to have that shadow. Now there's actually 2 more renderings I did. Obviously there's actually 3 more. There's the actual mask, which I've already placed several times here, but I have a version of it here in case I need it. And I also did a clown pass, which is basically just going through when all is said and done. When everything's done, I just saved it as a separate file, so I don't have to worry about messing it up. Where I just apply a flat shade and a different color to each subtool, and then render them out, so that I could use that as a quick little mask or color picker to isolate certain things later on if I need it. Right. So this is just useful because when I comes like if I start painting over and I want to paint only in, say, the little area between the armor here, I can just use the magic wand, select the orange, and then just paint in the selection. The other one, one other one that I, that it's good to know that exists is the depth pass. And again, like that's one of those ones where, again, if you already know, if you've done this 1,000 times, I apologize. But like this is useful, right? Because it's a mask it's luminance based on camera, how close it is to the camera. And what do you do with this thing? Like, you can use it as a mask, obviously, but you can also use it as essentially a guide for like a lens blur. And what do you do? Like, where do you find that? Well, like, where do you put it? Well, this is where you put it. So I'm going to open this up. Now let's hit Control A to select all, and then Control C to copy. And I'm going to come in here. I'm not going to put it in my actual layers at all. I'm going to come over here to the channels. This is like your RGB, your red, green, and blue channel, right? This is kind of like under the hood stuff. And I already put it here, but you just make a new layer. So again, you can't see me. I'm going down to my little make a new layer button. And then you just paste that depth pass in there, right? And you can see how you're seeing it because it's on. If I come back up here and just click on RGB, it hides that again, and everything's fine. Go back to your layer. But now it's there. It's available to you to get to. When you do something like a camera lens blur to kind of fake depth of field, you can kind of like direct Photoshop to that. You'll use that as its guide. So again, if that's something you already know, I apologize, but some folks might not know it because I shouldn't until I saw a tutorial about it. So all that being said, we've now brought everything in, right? And now we're just going to play around a little bit with these different layers. So I'm going to open up my spec, and here's spec 1. So you can see here again, this is really coming from the right-hand side. All I'm going to do right now is just change this to screen, and you can see here I'm getting some nice specularity on the body. On the face, he's getting some spec there too. I'm not loving that because I don't want him to feel like he's like, sweaty. So you can see here we have a little bit of speck on the face, right? So I'm going to make a quick little mask, and with my paintbrush. Now, for my paintbrush here, I'm just going to go to my general brushes and just use the chalk brush, which is the bunny brush. This is the one that looks like a little bunny. And if you're using the newer version of Photoshop, it probably isn't available in your brushes when you first go, you might have to go up here to your little drop down menu and bring in your legacy brushes, because I don't think it's in there with the basics. I love my little bunny brush. I don't know why. I just think it's cute. So again, I'm gonna come in here in my mask, put black as my color, and just paint that part out a little bit. So again, stupid little thing like that, but I just want to kind of make sure that he's not getting too shiny in the face. I just want to have it shiny around the armor, and that's it, right? Oh, thank you, Matrix. Yeah, see, that's that's good to know, because again, like I'm always convinced that everyone else knows is doing it a whole different way, and then I'm just completely in the dark. And how would you know otherwise? So there should be a kitten brush, Jamie. It should be. If not, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna have to work on one, because now I can't work without it. Here's my other spec, and again, this is light coming from the other side. And if I go to add, linear dodge add instead of screen, it makes it a little bit brighter, which I kind of like. But as you can see, again, way too much shine in the face. So I'll just make a mask and then paint that out. I don't really want that in the face at all. I don't mind the shine on the armor, obviously, because it makes a certain degree of sense. But that's, again, it just kind of gives us a little bit of extra, right? And we're going to have a lot more of that. So even this might be too much. I'm just going to tone that back a little bit. I don't want this to feel too metallic. I almost want this to feel almost plasticky. I don't know. Because the gold stuff is metal. The blue stuff I felt is kind of like, it's not quite metal, you know. So again, spec, no big deal, right? So materials, and again, this is very much like the other lighting passes, where you kind of just experiment and see. Like this material here, the blue chrome. Obviously, it's not going to go everywhere, right? And it might not even, it might not even go anywhere. But I'm going to try some basic blend modes here. So for me, something like overlay and soft light are always a great place to start when you're looking to kind of like blend in stuff. So I'm going to look at overlay, soft light, and I'm really looking more at like the actual armor. And I'm not looking to kind of replace the actual armor. I just want to kind of give it a more armory feel. So again, like this is kind of cool for the sword blade. It kind of gives it a little more of a bluish tint. It gives the arms a little more of a bluish tint as well. And I kind of like that. I like the idea of him being essentially this guy who is very, very concerned with looking the part, right? So again, what I tend to do is, because this is in a folder that already has the mask of the character in it, no matter what I do, right, it's only going to show up where the character is. So I like to kind of paint in the material as opposed to painting out what I don't want. So what I'm going to do is select my little blue chrome layer here, and instead of just making a mask for it, I'm going to hold down Alt and then make the mask, and that makes it a black mask, right? So it makes it a negative mask. So literally now there's nothing visible. And now I can come in here with my brush set to white and kind of like bring in with the white paint a little bit of that shine that I might want. It kind of allows me to really kind of control exactly where it goes, and it's a lot. I feel like it feels much more intuitive to paint in, right, the material that you want, as opposed to painting out. So I'm just coming in here again. I want to kind of hit these little top points here. All the stuff I'm doing too. Remember, if I feel like it's too much, I can just tone down the opacity of the layer as well. But I'm just trying to kind of bring in some of these little metallic areas, you know. And come in here again. I'll zoom in a little bit more on the shoulder parts, the helmet. And here's where, again, if I can see, is it the face getting there? Yeah, so you can see the face is getting some of that right now. And to make it easier to kind of like paint that part out, I want to get the helmet a little bit shiny. But again, I can now go back to this is the fun part. I can go back to my clown pass here, right? Go to my magic wand and tap on that color for the face to have it selected. And then I can come back in here to my mask on the blue chrome with black as my color and just paint that, right? So that it's only painting out that area. I don't have to worry about having to stay inside the lines. I can just select the area that I don't want it on and then paint it out, right? So I like the idea of painting in what you like as opposed to painting out what you like. I'm gonna put a little bit of this on the little chainmail thing underneath. I want that to shine a little bit, but mostly I just, again, I want to get a little bit of a bluish tint. I just kind of like that idea of him being very, very concerned with looking the part, right? Stolo, how you doing, man? Thank you so much for coming around. Oops, I messed up. Okay, so again, before, right, and after. And again, it might be a little heavy, so maybe I'll tone down the opacity just a little bit, just to kind of make it not quite so, in your face. And now the brass, you can see here, this is really for a specific part. It's for these little kind of golder parts here. And so I'm going to do the same thing, right? I'm going to bring this in. I'm going to play around with maybe doing like a blend mode. I always start with overlay and soft light. They're always kind of my go-to, but who knows? There could be something better beneath that. It's always like I have it's one of those things where I know what multiply does. I know what add do. I have a feeling about what overlay and soft light will do, and then after that, it's just complete and total mystery. I have no idea. So yeah, who knows? But I'm gonna actually, I kind of like what overlay is doing with this. So once again, hey Frederick, how you doing? Look at that! Thanks so much for showing up. Again, this is the season finale, so we have to go out with a bang here. So again, I'm just gonna hold down Alt and make my mask, and come in here and just kind of paint in where I want that little gold area here. And if I really want to kind of make sure I stay inside the lines, no problem. I'll go to my clown pass, select, in this case, say the blue, because that's where there's some gold stuff. There's some gold stuff here. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and select the all the gold type areas here. There are a few more gold type areas, but I can try and stay inside the lines for those. Now I go back here into my mask with my little bunny brush, and slowly bring in some of this, right? And just kind of bring in some of that gold feel. And again, I can always get rid of it if I don't like it. Just want to kind of start layering in this stuff here. Bring in some of the gold here. And on this side, I kind of get more of a shadowy area here. And that'll be kind of good. I'll deselect that. Now I'm going to just go back to my clown one more time, just because even though being very picky. Interesting. Oh, because I'm on the wrong layer. That's fine. Even though there's some extra blue in here, I just want to bring some of that in. I'm going to try and stay inside the lines as best I can. Right. All of this, again, this is all still just material. Like I haven't done any painting over. I haven't done any texturing, but there's still time. There's still plenty of time. I'm going to deselect that so now I can kind of add a little bit here to my little stuffies. But I also kind of like this here. It kind of makes it look like it's kind of a little tarnished down here. Let's come down here. What I also want to do, again, you can see here I have some darker metallic stuff around the ankles. So I'm just going to kind of lightly blend some of that in. I just kind of want to have a little bit of variation down here so it's not quite so monotonous. Go back to black and just push that back. Probably should do a little on the boots. Right, so again, I'll say it's probably 1,000 times, and I apologize in advance, but this is still all. It still feels very preliminary. This is kind of like just starting to get a feel for what the main colors are, but the textures, the materials, and again, this is meant to be kind of a cartoony feel of a character. So like some of the things I might be doing going forward, like with texturing and all that kind of stuff, it might not necessarily be right for this character. But this is really more about just the process. So like, just keep that in mind. Like, not everything I do with this character is necessarily because I feel this character needs it. It might just be because it's a cool thing to know. I'm going to go here and select the helmet really fast. And just come and add a little bit of that. I know it's not the helmet, but only the trim. I'm getting the blue as well, but it's okay. Just want to add a little bit of that in here. Again, just to add a little bit more gold brassy stuff. All right. So, thanks. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was actually going to do it, but I think it's kind of cool just to add a little bit more variety to it, because it's just the same color everywhere, just a little bit. Now this metal, I don't even know if I'm going to use, but hey, why not? Let's just go here. So this is one of those things where once you find a version of metal that works once, maybe you don't really need this. This might not be bad though for some shadowy areas. Um, so I might do that too. I might just come here. I might just alt click to mask that part out, and then kind of lightly. I'm gonna actually in this case this is heresy. But I'm gonna leave behind the bunny brush for a second and just go to the soft round brush so it's got a little more of a feathered edge. But maybe I just want to kind of bring in a little bit of that shadow here. So I'm just kind of like bring in a little bit of this. It's not going to be too obvious, but it's just trying to kind of like, you can see I'm darkening the inside of this a little bit, but I'm not darkening it with pure black. I'm just darkening it with a darker version of metal, because I set it to overlay, and overlay, I guess, what overlay does, from what if I recall correctly, is it pretty much just ignores 50% gray, and so it'll kind of emphasize the dark and light. So if there are dark areas, it emphasizes that. If there are light areas, it emphasizes that. If it's kind of mid-range, it kind of ignores it. So I think it does. So again, just adding a little bit of shadow here. So again, this is not making a whole lot of difference, but you can see it adds a little bit of, it's almost like an occlusion pass in a way, just kind of gives them some shadow there. So here's subsurface scattering. Now again, this is I'm going to actually play around with this a little bit because this clay pass is a little bit dull. So I'm just going to do a quick hue and saturation adjustment here. I'm going to crank up the saturation a little bit here. Maybe move it a little toward the orange, like this. A little lighter, like this. Okay, so now I'm going to change this to soft light, and you're going to see basically it's going to kind of like make the face a lot oranger. Which is not what I really want, obviously. But I'm going to hold down Alt, and remove that mask, so make it a negative mask. And now I'm just going to kind of again lightly come in here and just bring in a little warmth to the face, right, something like this. Now I'm going to get rid of the eyes. I think I'm hitting the eyes a little bit here too. Obviously I don't want that, but get a little warmth here. So again, if I turn this off and on, right, you can see. Get a little warmth in there. I'm going to tone down the opacity just a touch so it's not quite too intense. But again, if you had a character with if you made this like something like color dodge, you can really get some cool looks for it. Feels really translucent, but it's not really the case here. He's not really being hit by a lot of sunlight, so it doesn't really matter if he's got too bright here. I'm going to come in here and just paint out around the eyes because I don't want to have pink in the eyes. But again, very subtle little thing. It just kind of gives the face a little extra warmth. And I kind of just like adding that in there, right? So those are our materials. All right. Now the rim lighting, I'm going to skip the effects. I'm just going to go to rim lighting really fast, just because this is kind of really nice to bring the character away from the background here. So let's bring this in. I'm going to bring in rim 1. See, rim 1 is obviously got light coming from the right hand side here, and I'm just going to change the blend mode of this, to something like add, right, or screen. I'm going to go with add. You can see here it gives us a lot here, which again we're going to adjust in a second. But a couple of things you can do here. So first of all, let's around the rim light. Yeah, okay, cool. So this one here, I'm just going to make a mask. Now, you could actually literally just paint black over the part you don't want, right? Because, ultimately, if you have such an add, paint black, it's the same thing as erasing. But I don't want to lose anything, so I'm just going to make a mask really fast. I'll hold down Alt, make a mask, and then bring in, where I might want to have a little bit of rim light hitting it, right? Just a little hint of like, again, something reflecting on the helmet on this side. Most of it's going to be coming from the side here. He's already got quite a bit of light on him already, so I don't really need a whole lot of this. But this is the part that I think is kind of cool. So if I go here to rim number 2, this is where it's mostly just kind of hitting him from, not hitting a whole lot of color here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of adjustment layers on this. Let's say, for example, I want to give him a rim light that's not just white, but also has a color to it. You could just colorize this, but I'm going to do a hue and saturation adjustment layer right above this. I'm going to hit my little white box here to kind of link it just to this layer. And I'm going to turn on colorize, make it, so in this case, maybe gold or something like that. So basically what I'm getting is kind of like a nice little gold rim light here. Obviously, I'm going to get rid of some of this. But if you kind of crank this up a little bit, right? You can see you're going to get some nice little rim light here. And now I'm going to do another adjustment layer over top of that. Also levels and link that as well. So I can kind of make this a little bit brighter, right? So now I have this really kind of like vibrant gold thing, rim light. I'm going to make it a little more orange. And what I can do with this now is I can just go back to my original layer here, hold down Alt, make my mask go away, and then just bring in just where I want that light to be hitting. Now this is still set to normal. If I set this to add or screen, now I'm going to get just a little hint of, I should probably be in the right, I'm stupid. Let's just go back to before I did that because I was painting black on the wrong stinking thing. I'll make it add, go into the mask, and then bring this back. So you can see here, I can kind of like bring in this gold rim light here if I want to. Right? Again, I kind of colorized the layer, set it to, and then I set the layer to add, and then I kind of like just bring in this kind of like warm reflected light coming from offside here, right? So I can get this and you can see here what I'm talking about. I'm getting this nice little kind of like green, this kind of like glowy gold rim, which again is just kind of it's kind of, if you zoom in here, you can see I get this nice little kind of like, feels like it's light is reflecting off of the inside of his armor here, and you know, and because it's all an adjustment layer, I can change the color if I wanted to. If I didn't want it to be gold, I can make it blue or red or what have you. You know, it's kind of nice little thing going on. I can change this to say, you know, purple if I wanted to, right? Or red, you know, or blue. You can kind of like have a nice little kind of, you know, color thing going on here. So I just want to kind of play around with giving him this kind of like almost, whatchamacallit, like ethereal thing going on. Because again, he's a paladin, he's supposed to be kind of like this holy warrior, you know. So let's bring in the top one here. Again, not much going on here. I'm going to set this again to something like, you know, add, and just tone it way down. A little brightness here, not a whole lot. Again, you don't need to use them all. In fact, I might go back later on and turn them off. But this was all just about kind of getting a lighting setup that I thought was neat, right? And you can always tweak this as much as you want. I might bring in some of this here, now that I think about it. But it just kind of gives you something to start with, right? Now, these armor pieces are way too bright. They're way too almost like, you know, they're almost white. So that's where a lot of our metallic stuff is going to come into play, which is fine. Let's go here to our effects, because we have reflection here, which is going to give us a lot of that metallic stuff in the legs. So let's go to my reflection. And again, you know, like if I go to my my overlay, you can even go to something like multiply sometimes to get something cool. I'm just looking at the way it looks on the metal, obviously. I kind of like that. That looks pretty neat. Cycle through. Overlay, of course, always looks good. Soft light is a little more subtle. Hard light looks kind of neat in the I'm looking mostly at the thighs here. So yeah, I think we'll go back up here to, I'm going to stick with my little soft light here. Maybe overlay. It's still too dark. So okay, I'm gonna go with hard light, tone down the opacity, and basically I'm just gonna go to my clown pass here, go to my magic wand, select the two legs because those are the ones that I'm most interested in at this point. And I'm gonna make a mask, and basically it's gonna make a mask and only apply that to it. So you can see here, now I can come in here if I want and bring in more selectively some more metal. But all of this is still just about material. There's no texturing going on at the moment, and that's coming later. But I wanted to kind of bring that metal texture in here a little bit, right? Something like so. And now let's bring our other reflection here. This is that other one. It's a little bit of a weird one. And again, it's just one of those ones where I just want to kind of see whether I want to use it. I don't think I've actually used this pass before. Not thinking that it really does a whole lot for me right now, so I'm just going to turn it off. You can kind of use it. My cavity pass is, again, always a soft light thing. So I tone down a little bit. But again, you can see what this does. If I just turn this off and on, it just, I don't know. I just like the way it looks. It makes it feel old fashioned sometimes. I don't know. It just looks neat. Coming back to my rim lighting here, I kind of think that maybe that color should change. Maybe I do want to go to something more like blue. I don't know. I can't decide. I can't decide. I'm gonna stick with. I guess I'll stick with this for now. But I kind of wanted that to be a little bit more. So we'll see. I'll tone it down a little bit. All right. So now we got rim lighting closed up. Okay, we have effects. Comic, I'm going to leave alone for now. All right, so we've done all these things, right? And now I'm going to play around with actually adding some texture, some painting, and that kind of stuff. I'm going to do everything I do. I'm going to do behind rim lighting just because I want that to be on top of everything. I don't want to paint over top of the rim lighting. So I'm just going to make a new layer right in between. And I'm just going to put this in a group right off the bat. So I'm going to pop this in the folder here, and I'm just going to hold down Alt and drag that mask from the rim lighting to the group. So it's already going to be set in there, right? I still don't have to worry about that being a problem. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go here back to my bunny because I love the bunny. God help me, love the bunny. And I just want to kind of start adding a little hint of color in some of these places. So I'm going to go to my blend modes and change this to color. I just want to kind of see if I can add a little bit of color to that armor. So I'm going to go to my little clown pass here and just grab the armor. I just want to see how this works really fast. Maybe the shoes too, why not? So here it's at the color. I'm going to get my brush. I'm going to kind of bring this into kind of like a bluish gray. And you can see I'm just going to kind of bring a little bit of that into here. Nothing big. I just want to kind of add a little bit of that color in there because it was a little too light for my taste. Now, I don't want it to be where that gold was, so I'm just going to erase it. But I just want to add a little bit of that. So again, just keep that in mind. Obviously, you can do that as much as you want. You can kind of add some color in there with a color layer just because, you can. But I just wanted to kind of add a little bit of blue. I didn't want it to be quite so light. I want to have a little bit of coolness to it. All right, cool. So now I'm going to kind of play around again with some texturing and that kind of stuff. Looks to me like there's some kind of weirdness on here. I want to find out where that is. This is the fun part. This is where you're like, okay, what layer is causing the problem? I guess is it's going to be the rim lighting? No, nope. Base lighting? Nope. Spec? No. Materials? No. How is it not any of the? There it is. I was going to say, how is not any of these things? Find out, is it the cavity? No, it's the reflection. Okay, so we'll just come in here and paint that out because that just looks nasty. Very nice. Okay. The name of the bunny brush is, well, it's actually called chalk. So if I go here and go to my brushes, it's called the chalk brush. Like I said, I have it in my general brushes folder, but that's because I put it there. I dragged it up into that folder. It's not in the standard brush palette anymore. It used to be, but if I go up here in my little drop down menu and go to legacy brushes, it'll be in there in the basics. Go to find chalk. I found the chalk 11. They're all the same, but chalk 11 was the one I always used, so I just dragged it up there. But I mean, honestly, I don't know why why I like it so much. I liked it because it didn't have it didn't have a perfectly round size shape, so I just went with that. And I ended up liking it. Okay, so when you change the renders into yeah, guys, I always do save them as Photoshop documents. I don't know that it matters much if you save them as a PNG or JPEG. I would just save them as Photoshop documents. Good question, why? I don't know, but yeah, I've always done that just because I guess. Yeah, I've always done that. I don't know if there's a reason or not, to be honest with you. But because I think most of them save out as Photoshop documents by default, pretty sure. So yeah, I just assume that that's the best way to do it. Not necessarily true, but that's the way I've always done it. But yes, let me just, okay, so I can see in my effects, I have a couple of weird things. So that reflection map here, I have to go in there and just do a little cleanup here. Okay. So a lot of this stuff here in terms of adding texture, that kind of stuff. So much of it is going to be the same process over and over again. So again, I apologize in advance if that's the case. But so much of this is going to be bringing in a texture, masking it out with a negative mask, and then painting in what you want. So for example, here, if I want to kind of like, make this belt feel leathery or something, I might find a leather texture, right? So I'm going to go to now of course, you can go get textures everywhere forever and ever and ever. I have a bunch of textures that I've like gotten, just by looking for them over and over again, that I kind of like. So again, here is a leather book cover. I'm just going to bring this in. You can see because it's in a folder that's got that mask on it, it's already like, showing up where it needs to be, which is kind of cool. I'll hold down Shift and disproportionately scale this. I want to kind of keep some of this stuff here. So now I bring it up here. And again, you might even change your blend mode with this too, right? To kind of get something different. I might actually just keep the normal one though. I kind of like that. And because I have my clown pass, I can just select it and come here to my belt. And I'm just going to make a mask out of that, right? So it already kind of makes the mask, makes it fit. But now I can just go to my brush in black if I want to and adjust some of this. Now, what I might also do, instead of actually painting this part out and bringing in a lighter leather texture for like the little trim, I think it's just as easy to actually do an adjustment layer. So let's try something like, I'm going to try hue sat. Let's see if hue saturation works. I'll link it to there. I'll shift the hue a little bit to the lighter side of things, something like that. And then I'll just, again, I'll select my little mask here for the hue sat, Control I to invert it, and then I'll just start painting white, where I want that adjustment layer to apply, right? So I'm just going to apply my adjustment layer that way. That way I don't have to worry about necessarily, bringing in a whole other texture. I can just, I'm actually going to desaturate that and brighten it, something like this, yeah. So now I'm just going to bring some of this stuff in like this. So again, I just kind of get a little bit of a different look here for this. And, what I like to do, and this is just me talking, but this is what I like to do. To get some variation here, this is what I like to do. So this layer here that I have here, this is my leather for my belt, right? So I'm going to Control J, which duplicates this. And I'm going to bring that duplicate above. So now it's sitting above that layer I just did. And I'm going to set the blend mode here to multiply. So it's going to darken it, right? And now I'm just going to, first of all, I'm going to get rid of this mask because I want to bring in a new one. So I'm just going to say delete layer mask. And I'm going to now alt click to, bring a black mask in. So I have a multiplied layer with the exact same leather on it, and I can't see any of it, right? So now if I come in here and start painting white in that area, right, I'm going to kind of bring in a darker version of that same leather. So it's kind of like getting a shadow, right? So I'm trying to kind of get like a shadow version of this. And I'm just doing it by duplicating that same layer, setting it to multiply so it darkens itself, and then bringing it in and kind of painting it. And you can do the exact same thing, obviously, for highlights. You can duplicate that layer, set it to screen, and then do the same thing. In fact, that's what I tend to do. So again, I have my little, my little leather here. I can switch to white to kind of push some of that stuff back, so it's not quite so intense. But you can see here how very quickly you can just get some variation just by doing it that way. And again, I'm going to take this exact same layer, Control J to duplicate it. I'm going to once again get rid of that mask. Not apply layer mask, you goof, delete. And again, now I'm going to set it to screen, right? So now it's a brighter version. I'll alt click to make that mask go away. And then I'll come in here and kind of paint wherever I want the brighter version to show up, right? So again, I can just kind of I should probably have white as my brush though. There you go. So now I can kind of come in here and just kind of bring in some lighter versions as well. And so again, I'm just taking that exact same texture and just layering it on top of itself with some variations, right? It's just, again, it's nothing big or special, but it's just a very quick way, in my opinion, to get some really easy shadows and variation. Again, almost like free occlusion if you just paint in around that part. I'm going back to the original multiply layer and just kind of painting some of that in. And just having a little fun with this, right? So that to me is kind of a cool thing to do. I want to kind of play around with this belt buckle thing. It's kind of like a sunburst thing. So I'm going to do that same thing. Watch, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to go back to my base lighting here. I'm going to go to my original one, my little layer 0. It's just a basic render of that dude. Control J. I'm going to bring this up out of that layer, and I'm going to bring it on top of my belt. This is still part of my belt layer here, right? So here's my regular guy. I'm going to set this to color dodge, and then Alt click, make it go away. And now wherever I paint white, right, it's going to kind of bring in that really vibrant color explosion that kind of like just makes that belt really stand out, right? So before, right, and then after. Color dodge is an amazing thing for getting really bright, kind of like almost illumination. It's almost like luminescent highlights. I really kind of dig that for this kind of thing. You can use it for metal too, right? Just kind of like hit the top of metal and get a nice little burnishy feel. You can see like right here, you get like a little, metallic burnishy thing happening there, which I kind of like. And this is where the clown pass will really come into play, because obviously you don't want to have this crazy color burnishy thing happening everywhere, just on the metallic stuff. But so I'm going to select that, come back here to my color dodge thingy, bring a little of that nice kind of burnishing thing happening, right? And so again, just before and after, we got before, right, and then it just kind of stands out a little bit. And especially for metallic stuff, I feel that this is kind of where it really helps, because metal can look really kind of boring, but it should have some hot areas, right, that kind of like really are reflective based on the position of light. So it just kind of gives you a little bit more variety in there, right? So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'll go back here. I'm gonna go grab these pieces here. You can do them all at once. Obviously, I'm just trying to what I'm trying to guard against is getting too overdoing it. And if I can do it everywhere at once, then I'll probably overdo it. If I do it only a few places, I'm like, okay, that's enough. But yeah, so just trying to kind of get a little bit. You can see here, for example, that was not good. Coming here, a little bit of a. Let's try that. I'll deselect, come in here with my little color dodge. Get a nice little, nice little brightening going on here. Okay. So again, you're getting some interesting, effects going on here. I don't know how it would look on the belt. Let's try out. Let's see how this. Pretty cool on the belt, right? Like the sun's kind of peeking through this little area. Is there anything the bunny brush can't do? Where'd that bunny brush go? These little rivets, a little light popping on them. What about the face? Maybe a little bit on the cheek. There's a little bit of, a little bit of light there. Incidentally, if you're doing eyes, paint over, and you want it to feel like there's really some light hitting the eyes, color dodge layer. That's the good stuff. Just letting you know. Doing a little reflection in the helmet here. Again, just like this random sun, this random little brightness there. It feels like there's something there. Maybe there's a sun. Maybe it's something. Who knows? All right. So that's always a good way to kind of play around with that, by the way. Just throwing that out there. And you can do the same thing, obviously, with just taking a character's face and doing a multiply layer and kind of getting some shadows going on, right? So let's just try a little bit of this. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to go with kind of a reddish hue. And again, I'm just going to do a little bit of this. I'm going to dump that in there. Set the blend mode to something like overlay. And again, Alt click. and just come in here again. If there's any areas that I feel like that needs to have a little bit of warmth or redness to them, I can even, again, I can always change this. I can go to hue and saturation, kind of move this maybe toward the purple, a little more purplish. And then I can come in here and just, again, bring in a little bit of that here just to kind of get us a little bit more color in the face. I'm going to tone down the opacity in a minute. Don't worry. Just and then I'm going to tone down that opacity so it's not quite so intense. Just get a little color in there. I'm going to jump around probably. I'm around the eyes, so I can't help myself. I'm going to play around the eyes. And I want to give, you can note here, the eyes don't have any highlight at all, right? And that's obviously something we want to remedy. So we're going to do that. First things first, let's go to white as our color. I'll go to my brush. I'm going to go to my normal hard round brush for this because we're just looking for a highlight here. Maybe a little bit of a, where's that highlight going to go? Is it going to be right there? Like that. Now, what I want to try, and this doesn't always work. I'm letting you know ahead of time. It doesn't always work. I'm going to go to the clown pass first. And let's go and select the eyes. So it's going to stay inside the eyes. So I'm going to make a new layer and just make a mask with that selected, right? So I already have the mask set up. This might not always work. It might not work. It might not work. I'm just throwing it out there. It might not work. But whenever I've done eyes, usually I don't do people. Usually I draw animals. Whenever I do eyes, I like to have a reflection in the cornea that kind of reflects its environment. I don't know how this is going to look, but that's okay. We'll see how this looks. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to come here with my lasso, and I'm going to kind of essentially draw out like this random jagged landscape. These are the trees. In case you're wondering, those are the trees. And now I'm going to invert my selection. So I just hit Control-Shift-I to invert my selection. And I'm going to go to my soft round brush. I'm going to make sure it's set to pen pressure, so that it's very, very subtle. And I'm going to sweep across here like this. Okay. Now I'm going to obviously need to kind of like tone back some of that. So you can see here what this does is it kind of gives the impression that there's something like there's trees or something in there, and above that is the brighter sky, showing up right now. And Gus, good call. Save your work, for goodness sakes. I haven't done that. So what I'm going to do now is invert my selection again, and just in the eye, just a slightly darker version. I'm just going to come in here and just darken the lower part here. Actually, let's undo that for a second. Okay, I have my cat now playing with my keyboard. This is not necessarily the best. I'm going to change this to multiply so that it won't lighten the lens. Right. So again, you can see here what I'm getting is, before it was kind of like this, and now it kind of feels like there's a little bit of a reflected environment. Now I'm very, very close up, right? From further away, it might not look quite so weird, but what I want to do is kind of get that impression that there's something being reflected in the environment. I'm going to tone down the opacity a little bit here, maybe. But so I'd like to play around with this idea. I like to kind of play around with the idea that there is an environment that is being reflected, right? So like these are the trees. Right. And then I go to my brush. I have multiply still set. So all that means is, right, the brush itself is not going to make anything lighter. So if I were to go over like the iris, it wouldn't make the iris lighter, right? Now I'm going to inverse my brush, my selection, I should say, right, and then just do a little paint across there. I should probably, again, I told myself, Brad, before you paint that, make sure you change your brush from multiply back to normal again. And guess what I didn't do? I didn't change it back to normal. So I'm going to do a bit of this, right? then erase what I don't want to see there. But like you can see again, it just kind of it gives a little hint of an impression that there's a little bit of an environment there being reflected. It's nothing. It's not that. It's not crazy amazing, but if I zoom in a little bit closer, you can see it just feels like there's a cornea there. Here's before, right? And then it just has a little bit of a thing there. It's again, it's one of those things that probably works better when there's more of an iris, when it's not just the white of the eye. But all right, so let's kind of play around now again with a little bit more metal textures and that kind of thing. I also want to kind of play around with little like maybe some cracks or damage marks to kind of make that feel a little bit more lived in, like for a sword, for example. You know, a little bit of that. So a couple little things to play around with here. All right, so let's do that. Let's bring in some metal textures here. So again, not everything needs to be perfect. Even though this character is one of those characters that probably likes such a thing, if you had a character that wasn't, well, let's figure something out. So again, you can get 1,000 grungy metal textures. I have 1,000 myself grungy metal textures. And I probably use the same 3 textures all the time, which is a bummer. I should probably not do that, but that's okay. I'm going to find a couple that I feel kind of like makes sense given what we're looking at here. So like this one here, always a favorite. It's got that kind of these kind of like nice little problems in it. This little guy is going to be a little bit of a challenge. But here's my metallic texture here. I'm going to kind of rotate it around, maybe make it a little bit something like this. Right. Let's see if I make this a darkening thing. So I'm going to metal and I'll go to multiply. And again, I'll alt-click the mask to make that go away and bring back the old bunny brush. And maybe just bring some of that metal texture in. You can just get a little. And you can see that metal texture is coming through here a little bit, right? I'm doing this with one hand because I'm holding my my little cat in my other hand. So this is, this is challenging. This is the challenging one. But yeah, get some more metallic stuff going on here. Some more like grungy metal, especially like in these little areas here. Oh, good. Now it's attacking my stylus. Yep, that's a kitten on the tablet. That's what that is. Okay, so I'm just coming in here again. I'm painting. Ow. All right. So I don't know if you can see, folks, that I have. You can see the challenges. But, oh. In case you're curious, he does have very sharp claws, even for a young kitten. Okay. You're lucky. You're cute. Here, a little bit of shadowing. Again, this is just a metal texture set to multiply. So it's not, it happens to look like shadowing, but it's really just, oh my God, my cat. It looks like shadowing, but it's really just a darker metal, which is, better because it's got a little bit more going on texture-wise. Come in here and get a little bit more metallic stuff, dark metallic stuff here, maybe. And again, like that's why I like using the mask, because you can always just knock it back if you don't like it. A little bit in here. But again, like this feels a little bit more realistic now. We got some nice little kind of burnished metal happening here, which I kind of like. Now I'm going to do here really quickly. And this is one of those. I'm going to call this texturing. I'm not done, but I just want to put it I didn't spell it correctly because the face feels a little too vibrant to me. So what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to go into my effects, I think, and make an adjustment layer here. And make it a hue saturation adjustment layer and just desaturate it quite a bit. And then go to my clown pass, select the face, and I'll make a mask out of that. I just wanted to tweak that a little bit so that it was just toned down. And I'll just mask it a little bit. Okay, cool. So let's see where we are here. Remote. All right, so we got some basic texturing here, but we have plenty more to go. Let's go here to another metallic texture, because now I want to do some metallic textures that are a little bit brighter and not darker. Because in a lot of cases, obviously, where you have metal stuff, when there's damage to it, you see the lighter stuff underneath, right? So let's do that. I'm gonna go here to my texturing again, make sure I'm in the right folder. I'm gonna paste this. Control T. Make this nice and big, so it's I don't know where I'm gonna put it, but it needs to be big enough. Now, I don't think I need to set this to screen or anything like that because it's already pretty bright, but maybe I'll just go, let's stick with normal for now. And again, Alt click. Now for this, again, you might want to try different brushes. So again, in my case here, I have a brush that I made. It's called Marker. All it really is, it's a dual brush, so it's got like two different things. I don't even know how that works, to be honest with you. I just played around with it. And I'm gonna make it do a little bit of an angle jitter, so it's a little bit irregular. But basically, it's just got kind of like a really rough, chalky feel to it. And what that will do is it'll just kind of like let it kind of bring in stuff a little bit more irregularly. So like you see how it kind of like comes in like that, right? So I'm gonna make this really big and just kind of throw some of that in there like this. You see how it's just kind of like a little bit of a speckly thing happening there? I don't know if you can see it, but it's like right there. So just kind of, again, it just gives me a little bit of an irregularity that I kind of like. So this is really more about, if you're hearing really this little squeak, it's because my cats are playing. And this is, yeah, it's just to mess it up a little bit, honestly. But like I said, I don't want him to be too messed up, but like, again, I feel it's always better to paint with a texture than it is to paint with paint sometimes, just because it's essentially giving you color variation and value variation, without you having to work for it too much. But yeah, this part has a very rough alpha to it, which is why I like it. It's kind of, it just kind of fakes natural stuff coming here like this, and then just switch it back to black and then push it back a little bit. Yeah, that's another reason why I like using masks. Kind of like just you can overshoot a little bit and then push it back with just with black. Like this. This is an overshoot. That's good. I'll hit black and then just push it back a little bit, and just still have a little bit of that messiness in there. And of course, like this is where also you would have, grunge and that kind of thing, right? So like you can do this with virtually anything. I'm going to bring in another metal texture, but I want this to be really like just unpleasantly yucky. Like for example, here, this bronze rust is actually pretty cool. Let's find one that's a little bit bigger. Let's find this one. This is nice. Feels like scales. folder called Rust Stuff. Might be good. At some point I'll find one I like. That'll do. So again, now this that'll be an interesting design. I'm not gonna lie. Bring this to here. Like multiply. So as you can see here, like again, this just like this looks really cool. But we'll just bring it in a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy with that. But let's actually go to our clown pass here. Select just the green here, so I can just bring in like right above, like right around the underside of this. Right where it would be tough to clean, you know, crevices and such. Make it a little bit more stiff. Like I said, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is probably not something that really fits this character because he's kind of like more concerned with looking all sparkly than he is actually with fighting, at least in my little character idea. But I mean, this is still fun to do, and it does give him an interesting look. It might not fit the character as I thought of that character, but who cares? It's kind of fun to play around with. So just coming in here with this. You use any brush you want. Obviously, again, Photoshop has a million of these kind of chalk brushes here. What's up, MJ? This to me, again, like this is why, you know, it's one of the reasons also laziness is a good one too. Why I haven't learned a whole lot when it comes to Substance and stuff, just because not because Substance Painter and like, you know, the rendering engines are awesome. I really do enjoy the process of just kind of coming in here and like painting. And the problem with that for me is that I tend to like to stop my projects too quickly. It's like, I'll do it in Photoshop. It's kind of like the whole we'll do it in post thing, which is not necessarily a good thing. But this is like kind of, I just feel like I have a lot more control here. I can decide, nah, I'll just, you know, I'll adjust it later on, or I'll just tweak it, or I'll turn it off, and then I'm all good. But yeah, this is a kind of the fun part for me. I think that I ran out of texture because I think that it stopped like right around here, so I'm not getting any down here. That's okay. Yeah, so again, just get some cool texture in there. I'm actually I'll bring in another one. I mean, what the heck? Let's just do this twice because I do want to have a little bit down here by the shoes, especially. Down shift and do that. Make sure I get the that in there. Multiply it is. Boom. Alt click. Jump in here. But yeah, this is to me, this is really the this is just really fun. Like because sometimes, especially in ZBrush, texturing isn't necessarily the most fun thing in the world, just because it's very vertex count dependent. And you know, I find myself sometimes having to kind of subdivide things way beyond what is needed just for the sake of being able to paint them, and I don't necessarily always love that. I just feel this is also more forgiving because an adjustment layer fixes everything. Over here to the sword. The sword has been kind of neglected. Painting. You know what? I don't think it reaches over here. That's okay. We'll do this one separately. Okay. Yeah. So again, we have some pretty cool weathering on the body here. Maybe we'll do another one for the helmet. Hopefully, this isn't getting too repetitive. Multiply. Again, there's an epic struggle going on here on my tablet between me and my cat. You can see the tablet stuff popping up here just because he's on the buttons. Like, and now he's making my tablet zoom in and out. This is That's not what I. This is an added challenge that I do not really necessarily need. So get some extra little stuff on there. There you go. So now I'm going to. Jamie, yeah, and that's what that was a big deal because when I was doing the X-Men comic book cover, like I was doing that comic ink paint job, and that was like it needs really sharp lines. So I had like this, this shoulder armor that was, 8 million polys just so I can get a sharp nose. Anyway, that was a challenge as well. All right, so let's now here. Okay, I'm going to go here to another layer here, and I'm going to go once again to my my face and make a mask. This is just because I want to kind of have a little bit. Oh, I should probably be on the right thinking thing. Folks, sometimes you just need to pay attention to what you're doing. I'm just going to do a little darkening here. Okay, thanks. Come on, bud. Okay. Folks, in case you're wondering, that was not my intention. That was not really, what I was looking for. That's my partner, my little feline partner, trying to make suggestions. But we all have our ideas, I suppose. But okay, I'm just gonna put a little stubble on my dude here. Go in the mask and just push that back if I want it to. There we go. So now the sword. Look at the sword. The sword needs a couple of things. It needs a leather handle. It needs some nicks and marks on it. The rest of the body also could stand to have a little bit of stuff because this is still very, very. What's the word I'm looking for? It's a little bit too pristine. Let's see if I can. Come on, buddy, help me out here. Seriously, folks, the struggle is real with this little dude. All right, let's look at the sword. So I'm going to kind of play around a little bit. First, I'm going to do is I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to bring in one more metal texture, just to kind of give it a little bit of some visual, some wear and tear, basically. So let's do something like that. Let's find. I already have this one. I'm not predictable. I want to bring in a whole different metal texture, and I bring in the exact same one I just did. So great. Okay, so let's grab this one. Let's paste this one. Zoom out. Scale it down. Shift this. Now let's see here. That looks cool. Then I go to overlay. Overlay is definitely it's the money blend mode. And again, Alt click and bring that back in. I'm gonna go back to my bunny because some things you just need the bunny brush for. And now, in case you're curious, he's at the monitor trying to catch my pen, my brush icon. That's where we are, in case you're curious. All right, nice little sword. I'm gonna try this. Don't know if it's gonna work or not, but I'm gonna try this. I might just try, just for funsies. just for fun, I might try to see if we can kind of give the impression, a little impression, just a little impression here, that this sword had seen some blood. Come on now. All right, so here I want to do that thing where you add like little cracks and stuff in the surface. So notice how this is going to work. Some days I got this down, and some days I really don't. So what I'm going to try to do here, and I might need to do this on top of everything, because if I try and put a crack in this or that, the rim lighting and stuff might be on top of it. So I'm going to make a layer on top. I just want to see how this looks. And again, I might not keep this. Kind of the fun of this here is you just don't know. I'm going to make a new mask for this. That way it's only going to affect the sword. I'm coming with my brush, set to black. I'm going to set the shape set to pen pressure so that I can kind of make it nice and thin. You can't prove it's blood. It could just be rust. It's possible. I want to come in here, and I'm just going to, again, I want to just try this here. So we're going to just come in here and just... So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by, it's going to look stupid at first, just for the record. And it might look stupid at the end as well, but it might not. I'm going to come in here and put that there. And now I'm going to start I'm going to go my little lasso tool. I want to have a nice clean edge here. So I'm going to just lasso off the part that I don't want. I got this little cracky thing in here, and one of the things that you can do, and again, this is one of those little things that I saw someone do. Like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. But again, it's probably obvious, but to me, it was like a revelation. So you get this little black line, and then you get white, a very thin line, and you just highlight the edge, and it feels so much more realistically like, like a little crack. This is good for panel lines too. If you're doing like, robots and stuff, panel lines, just a little highlight on the edge. I don't think you need all that there. I think somehow it went off of the, see, like just a little line. This is so cool. I'm very easily amused, but that's like, it's always just been crazy to me that works, at least to my eyes. Like you do a second one here. Like right here. I'll be really sloppy about this because I know I'm going to use my lasso. Boom. 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 Nudge it down. Delete. I've seen people. Yeah, I have not tried to paint miniatures. I've painted my own sculpts, but now like I'm looking to get into painting miniatures just because I can't deal with resin anymore. And I've seen that, and I was actually surprised to see. Like I didn't realize that was even a thing, MJ. That you actually paint the highlight on, which is awesome. I had not considered that was actually like part of the process, but it's amazing. One, how awesome it looks, and two, how people can actually do it and like not destroy the paint job, which is what would happen with me most of the time. Just gonna get rid of that part. Boom. It's a little hint of that, right? It's definitely easier when you can zoom in. But this same thing again applies obviously to anything, right? Like like whether it be leathery stuff or what have you, any kind of objects we're sliding on. Probably do a little darkening around the eyes. So I'm making a new layer for this. Probably, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be sloppy about this. I'm going to go to my eyeball icons here. I'm going to select those. And I'm going to just leave them like that. So I'm just leaving that selection. I'm not making a mask. I'm just leaving it like this. I have, again, just for the record, no idea if this is going to work. But I'm going to do this. I'm just going to kind of paint this little darkening line here, like this, right? Just paint right inside there. Then I'll go to my selection tool, nudge it down one or two little things, right? Delete what's left. So now I just have that, and then I can go to my move tool and just nudge that up, and that'll give me a nice clean line. Like that's all I'm doing. I'm not even going to worry about it. I want to kind of give it. I wanted to get the impression of some eyelashes, and I wanted to start first by having kind of like a baseline there, but I didn't want to have to worry about trying to get that in there, so I didn't. Just work. Smooth pen pressure. Kind of confused as to why this is still set to pen pressure when it's not set to pen pressure. It's just interesting. Okay. I mean, who knows? Yeah, don't know what's going on there. Okay, well, let's make a shot. I mean, this is why all of my minis would have to be wearing sunglasses. There's really no way around it. So maybe we'll do a little bit of, maybe I'll try a little bit of painting on here. I don't really know. Like I say, it's kind of cartoony, but what the heck? I got to transfer here. And again, I tend to like the idea of painting with adjustment layers. So like, let's say, for example, I want to hit some highlights on the face or what have you. Instead of trying to paint with a lighter color, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm gonna try and do an adjustment layer with exposure, for example, and then brighten it up a little bit, kind of like that. All right, you know, Control I to invert the mask, and then I can just kind of come in here with white and just kind of paint in, you know, where I might want to have a little bit of highlight, right? So something like this, I might kind of like a little bit of a highlight on the lip here. But like I like doing it this way also because I can always go back and adjust the adjustment. I can always like say, you know what, you know, that these highlights should be brighter or they should be toned down. And instead of having to repaint it, I can just adjust the adjustment layer. Micron pen. All right, that makes sense because there's just no way on earth that I'd be able to paint with a paintbrush like that. Like I can't. That is when I was painting my own prints. That was always that I put that off the most because like the eyes need to be painted well, and I had no confidence that I would be able to do that. None at all, and it's, you know. Got a little bit of a exposure to the face here. And let's zoom out here. Okay. So, all right, this is looking okay. So again, one of the things that, hopefully this is useful, by the way. Again, I haven't done a whole lot of actually painting. Like if I were doing like a creature, it'd be kind of cool to go in there and do some painting on the skin and texturing and all that kind of stuff. But again, it's not really any different than what I've been doing here. You know, I like to, sometimes I'll paint with actual paint, but more often than not, I'll just bring a texture in that's got the right color for the skin or what have you, and then just kind of bring it in with a blend mode because it's just, you know, it's faster and you don't have to worry about your paint color being so obvious. Yeah, God bless you, man. I can do that. That, I mean, that is I usually when I did my 3D prints, I always made the iris kind of an indentation, so there's no doubt where it needed to go. Later on, I tried to get fancy and actually not have that and just kind of paint it on by hand. And they were always cockeyed in some way. It was never good. It was never a good situation. I'm just going to bring in a quick little piece of leather, but I'm going to do some actual environmental stuff in a second. I just want to, because we're getting close to the 20-minute mark here. But I keep forgetting to put leather on the handle of the thingy of the sword. This is not sword leather. Come on. I still think I don't know why, but I just love the old leather book. I just think it's like the coolest leather ever. I wish I had more to it, but I love the old leather book. It's just got it feels nice and sturdy. It's not like too clothy. Nice. It's good for belts and for sword handles. Let's go here and grab my sword. I'm on the right layer, you goof. Go to my sword handle. And is it this one? Yeah. Make a layer for it. Make a mask, I should say. Blend mode, say something like overlay. Could be soft light. Yeah, soft light. There, but okay. So I'm just going to hide some of this here. It seemed to have like fallen off a little bit. Okay. So let's say I can't help myself. I gotta do this again. I gotta duplicate this layer and then set it to screen, and then I'm going to apply that layer mask so that it's just that. Make a new layer mask, and then bring it in like that. What ground effect it does on his prints, get some water decal. I've noticed him doing that recently. I kind of don't like it. I mean, it does a good job, but I don't think he's always done that. I think he started doing that recently, from what I remember. I think he said that, but yeah, I kind of like it the old way personally. There's more risk involved. Jamie, yeah, my name is your dad. So let's play around with now. Again, I'm not going to do too much with the environment, but I do want to pretend, for example, that we wanted to do something in the environment, right? So let's just kind of like to play around with that kind of stuff. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do one more. I'm going to play around with some adjustment layers, right? So I'm going to go here to my little color lookup, which is my new favorite thing, and but even so, like he does the eyes now, but I think that feels like it would almost be more difficult to do, because to get them in the right spot and to make them, I don't know how he does it. But anyway, so I'm going to go through these looks here to see what looks cool, if anything. I always find that the crisp winter look looks awesome. It's not always what I want. Yo, what's up, Hannibal? What's up, man? This is the season finale of theirs. I'm glad that you got in here. Yeah, so again, some of these don't even show up. Candlelight is funky. That's too much. I like that look. It's a little too cold, but still. Drop blues is kind of neat. I really dig that. Toning down the blues really kind of looks neat. See, this is the kind of thing that I feel almost like I'm cheating when I go through these, because like I'm not doing anything, but that looks really neat. Oh man, I like that a lot. Oh boy, so does that. See what I'm saying? Like I can't like how. It's the season finale, yeah, because as a teacher, like the school year starting, so like I don't know whether or not like I'll be active, awake around 3 o'clock time. So yeah, it definitely is just I would not be reliably available, so I wouldn't want to like have the guys have to wonder, oh, do we have are we going to have one this week or not? Like I don't want to just like use their channel, willy nilly. So once the year gets in starts moving and I feel a little bit more settled, hopefully the guys won't mind me jumping back in again. But yeah, that's kind of where I feel here. This I really kind of like this. Again, like I don't know how different this actually is from the original, but it just kind of gives it, I like the little orange little tone it gets there. Color lookup, folks, it's so awesome. It's just so cool. Okay, so anyway, couple couple of things I want to do too. Again, like just to kind of as a reminder, right? So if you were doing a character who was actually in the environment, right, you might want to bring in some noise and stuff like that, you know, some embers or what have you. But so, for example, one of the things that a lot of folks like to do, at least so do I, when it comes to making this feel a little bit less CG, is to put some noise on there. I want to try drop blues again. Oh, it's still kind of cool. I have this thing where I can't decide whether I want it to be really desaturated or kind of like, you know, really crazy. Like I love this for the background. Let's try this. Let's just let's see if this looks good with the background. I'm gonna put that over the backdrop because that looks really cool. And then maybe I'll do a different color lookup for him. This is fun. All right, so color lookup. I'm going to bring that mask up because I only want this to apply to him since I already have the background being applied by, you know, being affected by another one. And crisp winter. Too much, maybe. Okay, yeah, I like drop blues. I like that a lot. Again, it has a desaturated look, but it kind of makes sense given, you know, like he's an old-timey guy. So I'll tone it down a little bit, but I kind of like that. Gus, thank you. 3 more weeks. Wow. Yeah, I mean, actually, that's not that different. I mean, like the students don't come back until the very end of August, like August 31st. I think they come back. Usually it's September. We seem to have been inching more and more towards starting in August. I'm not really sure what the deal is with that. So it's 2 weeks, but teachers go back a little bit earlier. So, you know, yeah, the students don't start for another couple of weeks. It's true. So we were similar, but people down like in Florida and the southern part of New Jersey, they've already started school. So who knows what's going on? So one thing I mentioned at the beginning. Before I say, yeah, what's that, Hannibal? Yeah, no, and that's like it's true. Like it's during the summer, it's easy to have a certain day set aside, but I just can't predict what happens anymore because it's all crazy. So, but that's okay. Again, you know, I'll be sure to be bugging them to let me do this stuff as the year goes on once I get a feel for it. I mentioned at the very beginning about the depth pass, that thing that you came in. So I just want to kind of let you know like one way to do this. Now this is a kind of a flat picture of a character from far away. So this is one of those things where depth of field probably isn't that much of a thing, right? Because everything is essentially in a single plane. If you wanted to make something that would look like it was like really coming at the screen or had a lot of depth to it, then the depth pass and the lens blur will be a lot more of a thing. But I still want to show, you know, how you can do it because if you haven't done it before, because it is kind of cool. And in fact, you know, again, if you're doing a character like a dynamic pose where something is coming at the camera, a depth pass and a lens blur is really awesome for kind of selling that, especially if you want to have something that feels like on a small scale. It really feels like there's like a lot of depth to the thing. So I just want to kind of demonstrate, you know, one of the things you can do for this. So what you want to do first, now, like a lens blur, which is basically like a depth of field blur, right? It's going to affect the entire. It affects a single layer. So you want to have all this stuff merged into a single layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the very topmost layer here, and I'm going to do what's called a copy merge. And the copy merge basically, it's not going to merge everything like permanently. It's going to take everything below it, including the layer on, duplicate all those layers and merge them into a single layer. So it's like if you saved it out as a JPEG and then brought it back in as a layer. So I'm going to go in the very, very top here, and it's a crazy, ridiculous combination of keys. It's Shift, Control, Alt, and then E. And you're going to see I get basically a copied and merged version of this here. And now if I wanted to apply a filter, for example, it would apply it to the whole thing, right? It wouldn't apply it just to the layer that I'm on. It would apply it to the entire thing. So before I do that, I can't help myself. I'm going to do one more little layer. I'm sorry. It's not going to change anything, but I need to just really quickly, because it's going to drive me crazy here, I need to do a quick little edge highlight on my thing. So what I'm going to do here is, actually I'm going to do an adjustment layer. I'm going to do an exposure. I'm going to crank it up like that. Hit Control I to make this a black layer here. and then come in here with just the sword selected and my pen, and I just want to kind of bring a little bit of that to the edge. I couldn't live with myself if I just let it sit there like that. Now I'm going to nudge that selection over a little bit, and then paint black in there to kind of like clean it up a little bit. So again, I needed that. If I didn't have that, it would be terrible. I just needed it. Okay, so anyway, sorry. So copy merge. Here we go now. Copy merge. Okay, so now I have this little guy. Now that I have this completely all in one layer here, I'm just going to hit Control J to duplicate it. I want to have a copy of it in case I mess this one up. But now I can go and do my any kind of filter or any kind of like lens effect. So if I go up here, for example, to filter, right? I can go here to blur. I can go to, say, lens blur, right? And the lens blur is going to open up a whole separate thing, and it's going to look a little bit weird because it doesn't know where to put the blur based on distance. So you can come over here, and you're going to see the depth map source, and you're going to choose alpha 1. That is when I made that new layer, this guy right here in my channels, alpha 1, that's my depth pass, right? So it's going to use alpha 1 as its guide. So when I go to filter and go to blur, lens blur, it's using alpha 1 as its guide, but it doesn't make any sense right now. And the reason is because it doesn't know where in that depth map to focus. You just have to tell it, like, again, remember that depth map is like, it's a grayscale map, white to black. You just have to tell it what variation of that gray / white / black you want it to be the in focus part, and then it will then blur everything else accordingly. So to tell it, just tap where you want it to be. So I'm going to tap on the face. You can see here how the face gets clear and everything else gets blurred out. Now this is getting blurred out crazily, and the reason is because the radius, which is basically how intense the effect is, for some reason it must have gotten cranked up. I must have been playing around with it somewhere else. Usually I think by default it's like 15 or 12. So if I tone this down a little bit, maybe 7 or so, right? I can turn off preview. You can see here, it's just got a little bit of blur where things are out of focus. Now, again, for him, this might not necessarily be useful because there's not a whole lot of difference in terms of what's close to the camera and what isn't for him. But that is something that's really useful. Again, if you're doing something with a creature or someone who's coming at the camera and you really want to choose something to be in focus, that's a really cool way to go. He says, we have hurricane days, which is like, ooh, yeah. It does. It can dark. During the fall and winter, it gets dark up here 4:30, which is crazy because my body tells me when it's dark, I'm done for the day. So that's it's not a good thing. Yeah, it's a shame that we get hurricane days, and now here in the Northeast, we have to worry about tornadoes suddenly, which is a new thing. Let me save it right here. Okay, so I have 8 minutes. So yeah, so again, with this new merged layer, again, this is just letting you know there are some cool things up here in the filter here. For example, under lens correction, there's a really cool couple of things. Under this little custom tab here, there's a slider for vignette, so I can kind of move this toward darken. You can see how it kind of like gives you a nice little vignetting effect. You can actually brighten it too if you want it to brighten it, but you can get like a nice little kind of like free vignette. Oh, I was playing with the color lookup because that's an adjustment layer, so that can affect everything. You don't need to do a copy merge. In fact, I did a couple of those for here. But there are the other filters as well. There's also a distortion here. Sometimes this is cool, not always, but sometimes it's cool. So for example, if I grab this distortion and kind of move it a little bit to my left, come on, it's not going anywhere. There you go. You can kind of like bulge it out a little bit. It's not always what you want, but it's just kind of a fun thing to experiment with. I'm not going to do that, but the vignetting is cool, right? So it's just a little bit of a vignette that you didn't have. That was a vignette. You can do chromatic aberration. You can do all that kind of stuff. My color lookup filters are cool. Again, don't forget you have other things too. Obviously, you have levels and that kind of stuff. Always good to play around with. Sometimes, so again, I want to do a little bit of a noise on top of everything, like I mentioned before, just to kind of make it a little grainier. So you can see here, I'm going to just kind of zoom in here. You can see, right now, it's very, very smooth, right? It's very clear because it's CG. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I want my colors to be black and white. I think it does matter. I think it needs to be black and white here. I'm going to go my little paint bucket and just dump in some gray here. But now with my color set to black and white, I don't know if this needs to be there or not, but I think it needs black and white. So now I'm going to come here to filter. I'm going to go to noise. I'm going to go to add noise. And I want to make it monochromatic. I don't want to have any color in here. I just want it to be black and, grayscale, black and white speckles. And I'm going to change the blend mode to this. Now, overlay is cool. I always go to soft light just because it's a little less intense. I'm going to turn down the opacity in a second, but just so you can kind of zoom in here, you can see you get a little bit of a noise, a little bit of a speckly thing happening. Now, this is way too much for what I want, but it's actually pretty cool. I'm just going to tone this down to something like 20 or 30%. And again, it just gives you a little bit of speckle to it. Again, I can't tell. I'm not sure if you can see it where you are, but it does give you a nice little bit of, especially for an old-timey character like this, it's kind of cool. So, just something to keep in mind. Something also that I kind of play around with, I don't always use it. Sometimes I'll just mask it in here and there. And again, it depends on what you're doing. But for something like this, it might be kind of cool. I will never not try to bring in a paper texture over top of everything. Paper textures are awesome. If you find, if you get a texture that kind of feels just a little bit like this. Again, this might not look good. I have no idea. But I always like to bring this in and then try like a soft layer overlay, and then just tone it way down to like virtually, almost nothing. But again, it just adds a little extra bit of like warmth to it. It's almost like a noise in a way, because it has that paper texture. It just kind of like sits over it pretty nicely. And again, what I would probably end up doing is mask a little bit of it out. So if I do a mask here like this, I get my brush, and again, I kind of like the idea of it being kind of, I don't know if messy is the word, but so I'm gonna actually bring this opacity up a little bit just so it's more obvious at first, and I make my marker brush nice and big, and just kind of like bring in. You can see here, because it's got that really kind of like rough edge thing here. It just kind of like I don't know, hand painted feel to it. And not have to be right on his face there. But again, just having a little bit of that in here, I just kind of like the way that looks. It just kind of adds a little bit of a warmth to it, because the paper texture has like a goldish feel to it. Obviously that works for this because I have a goldish background, but of course you can adjust the color. It is Photoshop after all. So that's just something, again, I like to kind of play around with. I don't think it makes sense to have it too much on him, to be honest, but let's just do that. Let's just select him really fast and then paint that part out so it's not too much. There you go. By the way, in case you're wondering, you can hold down Control and click on a mask, and it will select just the white, so you can kind of get that selection nice and quick. Yeah, and again, whenever I do any of this, I always feel at the end that I went overboard with the color. So I'm just going to do one more hue and saturation and just tone down the saturation a tiny bit, so it's not too nuts, right? But this is my little guy here, and again, just to kind of like show the before and after, if that helps. I'm going to kind of grab that initial guy and do a thing here. So here's where he was, right? And then we have a little bit of, we just got a little bit more variety in the texturing here. Let's kind of zoom in a little bit more so you can see, like for the metal and that kind of thing, right? How you can kind of get a little bit more variety in the light and the texturing, so it kind of feels a little bit more realistic. Let's go up here to the head, and you can see again just a little bit more going on, right? Hopefully this was useful. Again, this is a character who has a lot of armory stuff. It's not really the best for skin texturing and that kind of thing, but hopefully you see that the same techniques could apply anywhere. And hopefully, again, that was useful to you guys. And again, thank you so much, Gus, Jamie, MJ, Hannibal, Mini Chicks, Ivan, Ben, everyone who has jumped in here and who has kind of like hung out with me for these past several weeks. And Jojo, I just saw you. I'm sorry, man. I just didn't see that up there about the miniatures. Everyone who has jumped in here and to say hi and to hang out with me. Again, I really appreciate it. Hopefully, season 2 will start sooner rather than later once the school year gets sorted. Hannibal, you had mentioned about the picture, the frame thing. Anytime, man, just hit me up in Discord. But again, hopefully this is useful to you. I wanted to have a stream where I kind of went over that process because I think it could be helpful to folks who want to kind of experiment with different ways to make their final renders have some variety to them. So again, hopefully it was useful. Thank you guys so much for joining me these past few weeks. Hopefully the B-side will be up again and running once I figure out how the year's going to look. If not, first of all, if you don't mind, like and subscribe if you haven't yet. And secondly, make sure you join us on Saturday. We'll be doing the Zelda stream again with the Stylus League. I look forward to seeing you there. Again, thanks everyone again for joining me these past few weeks. It's been a real blast. I hope to do it again. Thanks.